Imagine waking up, and for just one heartbeat, you remember someone. Their face. The warmth of them. The feeling that you needed to find them, that something incredibly important was slipping away with every second you stayed awake. And then it's gone. Every detail, every trace, dissolving like morning mist the moment you open your eyes. You can feel the ghost of something enormous, some love, some loss, some connection that mattered more than anything, but the harder you reach for it, the faster it vanishes. Now imagine that feeling wasn't a dream. Imagine it was real. Imagine that somewhere out there, someone else woke up at the exact same moment, in the exact same state of loss, reaching for the exact same thing, and neither of you can remember what it is. That, right there, is the emotional engine of one of the most extraordinary films I have ever had the pleasure of sitting with. We're talking about a movie that shattered box office records when no one expected it to, a film that made grown adults sob in packed theaters across the world, a story that transcends language, culture, age, and genre, and somehow still manages to feel deeply, painfully personal to every single person who watches it. We are talking about Your Name. Known in Japan as Kimi no Na wa, directed by Makoto Shinkai and released in 2016. And I am telling you right now, before we go any further, if you have not seen this movie, what I'm about to do is walk you through every single scene, every twist, every heartbreak, every breathtaking moment. And if you have seen it, you're going to remember exactly why you loved it, and maybe understand a few things you didn't catch the first time. So buckle up. Get comfortable. Because this is not a short story. This is not a simple love story. This is something else entirely. Something that lives at the intersection of body-swapping comedy, small-town longing, cosmic tragedy, and one of the most emotionally devastating third acts in modern cinema. Let's go. Section 2, Movie Overview, 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. What is this movie, and why does it matter? Your Name. And yes, the period at the end is intentional, it's part of the official title, is a Japanese animated romantic fantasy film. It was written and directed by Makoto Shinkai, produced by Comics Wave Films, and released in Japan on August 26, 2016. Now, let's just pause for a second on the context here, because the context is everything. This movie came out of nowhere. Shinkai was already respected within the anime community. He'd made films like 5 centimeters per second and The Garden of Words, which were beautiful, melancholic, artistically stunning pieces of work that won him a devoted following. But they were small films. Niche films. Films that anime lovers treasured but that never crossed over into mainstream conversation. Then Your Name happened. It became the highest grossing anime film in history at the time of its release, surpassing Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away, which had held the title for over a decade. Think about that. Spirited Away. One of the most beloved animated films ever made. Dethroned by this movie. It made over $380 million worldwide on a budget of around $7 million. That's not a success story. That's a phenomenon. In America, it had a limited theatrical release through Funimation Films in April 2017, and it still managed to crack the top 10 at the box office in its opening weekend. For a subtitled Japanese animated film that nobody's studio was bankrolling with a massive marketing campaign, that is genuinely staggering. The voice cast in the Japanese version includes Ryunosuke Kamiki as Taki Tachibana and Mone Kamishiraishi as Mitsuha Miyamizu. The English dub features Michael Cinternaklos and Stephanie Shea, and honestly, both versions hold up beautifully, though I'll always recommend the original Japanese with subtitles for the full emotional experience. The film's music was composed and performed by the Japanese rock band Radwimps, and their contribution to this movie is so significant that we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about it later. Because the music in Your Name is not background noise. It is a co-narrator. It is a force. Genre-wise, this film is almost impossible to categorize cleanly. It starts as a body-swapping comedy, yes, really. Two teenagers periodically swap bodies and have to navigate each other's lives. But that's just the door. Once you walk through it, you find yourself in a supernatural mystery, a love story, a disaster film, a meditation on memory and time and fate, and finally, in its last act, something that feels almost mythological. Audience expectations at release were curious. People who knew Shinkai expected something gorgeous and bittersweet. People who saw the trailers expected a fun anime romance. Almost nobody expected what they actually got. Which is part of what made the experience so electrifying. Section 3, Full Story Breakdown, 8 o'clock to 45:00. The full story, scene by scene. Part 1, The Swap begins. The film opens with an image of the sky. Specifically, a comet, a long-tailed streak of light dragging across a deep blue Japanese twilight. And even in these first frames, you feel something. Shinkai and his animators have created a sky that looks more real than photographs. The clouds have weight. The light has texture. The comet doesn't look like a sci-fi special effect, it looks like something ancient, something sacred, something that has been watched by human eyes for centuries with a mixture of wonder and dread. We then get two parallel introductions, a technique the film will use constantly, cutting between two lives as if they're chapters in the same book. First, we meet Mitsuha Miyamizu. She lives in the fictional small town of Itomori, somewhere in Japan's mountainous Gifu prefecture. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the hills roll green and misty, where tradition lives in the stones and the shrines and the seasonal rituals. Mitsuha's family runs a Shinto shrine. Her grandmother is the caretaker of ancient practices that most modern Japanese kids have little patience for. And Mitsuha? She has zero patience for it. She's a high school girl, and she is miserable in this town. She wants out. She wants the city. She wants Tokyo, the lights, the noise, the anonymity, the feeling of being one person among millions instead of the shrine keeper's daughter in a village where your every move is watched and judged. Her cry of frustration, "I want to be a handsome Tokyo boy in my next life," is delivered with such raw teenage desperation that it practically echoes. Then we meet Taki Tachibana. Tokyo. High school. Part-time job at an Italian restaurant. He sketches architecture in his notebook, navigates crushes on older co-workers, takes crowded trains, eats convenience store food. He's the city kid Mitsuha fantasizes about being. And one morning, he wakes up, and he's Mitsuha. Here's where the body swap mechanic kicks in, and Shinkai plays it with perfect comedic timing at first. Taki wakes up in Mitsuha's body, in her bed, in her room, in her small town life. He immediately grabs his chest, because he has a chest now, and screams. Mitsuha, meanwhile, wakes up in Taki's body in Tokyo, equally confused, equally panicked, equally fascinated. The film doesn't try to explain the swap immediately. It just shows you the chaos of two people trying to survive each other's lives. Taki in Mitsuha's body accidentally charms all of Mitsuha's school friends with his directness and self-assurance, does things Mitsuha would never do, is bewildered by the shrine rituals, eats too much. Mitsuha in Taki's body rides trains in wonder, marvels at Tokyo's scale, tries to do Taki's job at the restaurant, and repeatedly embarrasses him, but also, over time, starts to build relationships with Taki's co-workers in ways Taki himself hadn't managed. The swap doesn't happen every day. It's irregular. Sometimes a few days pass. Sometimes a week. And here's the key detail that sets up everything: they don't remember the swap as real memory. Each person, when they return to their own body, experiences the time away as a foggy dream. So they start leaving each other notes. On phones. In notebooks. On each other's skin, literally written on their arms in marker. Part 2, they start talking. "Do not molest my body." That's the first rule Mitsuha writes on her phone for Taki to find. And it's hilarious, but it's also the beginning of a communication system that the film handles with extraordinary tenderness. As the swaps continue, Taki and Mitsuha develop what is essentially a long-distance relationship conducted entirely in post-it notes and body language. They leave each other instructions. They fix each other's problems. Taki, blunt, decisive, a bit socially awkward, helps Mitsuha stand up to people at school, earns her social respect she'd never had before. Mitsuha, warm, intuitive, emotionally intelligent, starts rebuilding Taki's relationships with his co-workers, particularly with a woman named Miki Okudera. on whom Taki has a crush. There's something achingly romantic about this arrangement even before the two characters acknowledge it. They're not falling in love with each other in the traditional sense. They're falling in love with the version of themselves they see reflected in how the other one lives their life. Taki sees what his life could look like with more warmth. Mitsuha sees what her life could look like with more courage. And they're doing it for each other without ever actually meeting. Mitsuha also begins to draw a map of Itomori for Taki, a beautifully detailed illustration that becomes a significant object later. And Taki, when he's in Mitsuha's body, starts making a clay sculpture of what he sees in his dreams, the town's topography, the lake, the hills, the comet in the sky. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know what he's building. He just knows it feels important. Then, one night, while both of them are in their own bodies, each on a train, the camera pulls back and we see them on parallel tracks, heading in opposite directions, through the same dark tunnel, and just for one moment, their eyes seem to meet through the windows. It's a flash. A half second. Maybe it's nothing. But the film frames it like a collision. And then the swaps stop. Part 3: The Silence. This is where the movie pivots, and the pivot is handled so carefully that you almost don't notice the gear shifting beneath you. The swaps just cease. Taki tries to go about his normal Tokyo life. He goes on a date with Okudera-san, the date he'd been wanting, and finds he can't enjoy it. Something is wrong. Something is missing. He's been filling in the margins of Mitsuha's notebook in his mind, and now the notebook is gone and he doesn't know her phone number, doesn't know her last name, barely knows what town she lives in. He tries to find her. He sketches the landscape he vaguely remembers from their swaps, the town, the lake, the distinctive topography, and shows it around to restaurants and shops in Tokyo, asking if anyone recognizes it. Nobody does. The date with Okudera fizzles, not because she's unpleasant, but because Taki's heart is clearly somewhere else, with someone whose name he can barely hold in his memory. Eventually, he finds a small town that matches his sketch. Itomori. He and two friends, Tsukasa and Okudera, take a trip out there to find it. And here is where the movie detonates its first major bomb. They arrive at the site where Itomori should be, according to the map. And it's not there. There is a lake. A vast, still lake, surrounded by mountains. And the town, the buildings, the streets, the shrine, the school, is underwater. Submerged. Gone. Taki asks locals about it. A piece of the comet, the one that had been visible in the sky over Itomori all those months, had broken off 3 years ago. It had struck the town directly. Over 500 people were killed. And among the dead, listed on a memorial, is the name, Miyamizu Mitsuha. Let that land. She's dead. She died 3 years ago. The girl he'd been sharing a body with, sharing a life with, whose handwriting was in his phone, whose voice he could almost hear, she was already gone when all of it was happening. The swap was happening across not just distance, but time. He was in the past. She was in the future. And he didn't know. She didn't know. This is the twist, and it is absolutely merciless in how well it's been hidden. In retrospect, every clue was there. The comet was always in the sky over Itomori during their swaps. Mitsuha's phone was an older model. The events she described around her didn't quite match what Taki experienced as current. The film showed you everything and let you piece it together at the exact same moment Taki does, and the effect is staggering. Taki breaks down. And so did every person in every theater who didn't see it coming. Part 4, The Ritual and the Twilight. Grief doesn't stop Taki. He's determined. There is something else he remembers from his time in Mitsuha's body, a ritual. Her grandmother had taken her and her sister Yotsuha to the top of the mountain above the lake, to the ruins of an ancient shrine. There, they had left an offering, kuchi komikaze, sake made from chewed rice mixed with the maker's essence, in this case, Mitsuha''s. A deeply spiritual act, tied to the family's ancient heritage as shrine maidens. The sake had been left in a small vessel at the heart of the shrine. Taki climbs that mountain. Alone, exhausted, heartsick. He finds the ruined shrine. It survived the comet impact. On the mountain above the waterline. He finds the vessel. He drinks the sake. Mitsuha's sake. Her essence. And the world falls apart. What follows is arguably the most visually extraordinary sequence in modern animation. Taki falls into what the film calls Katawaridoki, a Shinto concept referring to the twilight hour, the time between day and night when the boundary between this world and the other is thinnest. The world fragments. Time collapses. And Taki finds himself back in Mitsuha's body, not vaguely, not dreamily, but completely, with full awareness, on the day the comet is set to strike. And across the way, standing at the top of the same mountain, on the same day, in her own body, Mitsuha sees him. Taki, in his own body, standing there. And she recognizes him instantly, not from any memory but from something deeper, the body knowledge of someone who has lived inside your life. They run toward each other. And in the Katawaridoki, they can see each other across the boundary. They almost meet. But here is where the film breaks your heart in a brand new way. The twilight is fading. As the last light dies, they start to lose each other, not just the vision of each other, but the memory. The film has established that memory of the swap is always dreamlike and fugitive. And now, as they stand on the edge of this magical hour, they can feel themselves forgetting. Not just the events, but each other. Their names. The most essential thing. Write your name. Taki shouts. So I won't forget. Write mine. Mitsuha shouts back. They grab hands. They hold on. They grab a marker. And in the last seconds of the twilight, Taki writes something on Mitsuha's hand. She looks at it. It doesn't say his name. It says, I love you. And then the twilight ends. And they're back in their own times. And they've forgotten. Part 5, The Race Against Time. For something has been left behind. Mitsuha wakes up back in her time, the day of the comet strike. And she doesn't remember Taki by name. But she remembers the feeling. She remembers that something enormous matters today. She looks at her palm, at what she thought would be her name, written by Taki, and she sees what he actually wrote. And whatever it is, it gives her the fuel she needs. She decides to act. She was already working on a plan. In the days before the comet strike, something in her had been screaming at her to do something, to warn people. She goes to her father, the town mayor, and tries to convince him to evacuate. He dismisses her. She breaks down. She tries everything she can think of. Meanwhile, Taki wakes up with no memory of what just happened, but something is moving in him. He makes a decision. He reaches out to Mitsuha's friend Sayaka and to their classmate Tessie, explaining what needs to happen even though he can't fully articulate why. Tessie, brilliantly, has access to explosives through his family's business. He sets off a blast that knocks out the town's power, disrupting a celebration event that was keeping all the citizens gathered at the school gymnasium, directly in the comet's impact path. In the chaos, Mitsuha runs. She runs from the hilltop where she's been trying to convince her father, back down to the town, through the streets, screaming at people to run. The comet fragment is already in the sky, blazing, enormous, impossibly fast. The evacuation siren goes off, not from the official warning system, but from Tessie's explosion triggering the power grid failure and the backup alarms. People start moving. It's enough. Just barely. The majority of Itomori's residents evacuate. They move to higher ground. They watch as the comet fragment strikes the lake below, sending up a column of fire and displaced water that obliterates the town. But the people are safe. Most of them. Over 500 originally died. Now, in this altered timeline, the death toll is nearly 0. The town is still gone. You can't stop a comet with a high school kid and some borrowed dynamite, but the people live. And Mitsuha survives. And Taki, in the future, comes out of his trance on the mountain above the empty lake, and something is different. Something in the world has shifted. He doesn't know what. He doesn't remember any of it. But the lake looks different when you know that the town beneath it didn't have to die. Part 6, 5 years later, the ending. The film skips forward. 5 years. Tokyo. Taki is now 21, searching for a job, grinding through interviews and life. He has a persistent, nagging feeling, not grief, not longing, but the kind of missingness you feel when something important has been removed so cleanly you can't even identify the wound. He sometimes cries on trains and doesn't know why. And on the other side of the city, riding a different train, going to a job interview of her own, is Mitsuha. 21 now. Alive, Contrary to the original timeline. Living in Tokyo, she made it, she got her city life, but carrying the same unnamed weight. Their trains run parallel. And then, somehow, impossibly, in the space of a heartbeat, they see each other. Through the windows. On the tracks crossing above Shinjuku. Their eyes meet for just a moment. Something electric passes between them. Something that isn't quite recognition but is bigger than coincidence. Both of them feel it so intensely that each exits at the next stop and goes looking, not knowing what they're looking for, only that they have to. They climb the same set of stairs, on opposite sides, ascending from the underground city toward the sky. And at the top, they see each other again. And here the film does something absolutely precise. It doesn't let them fall into each other's arms. It doesn't give you the immediate happy ending you've been aching for. Instead, they both hesitate. They both feel it, the pull, the recognition, the enormity of whatever this is. But they don't know what to say. They don't know why this stranger makes the world feel different. Have we met before? One of them asks. And the other feels their throat tighten. Yes, somehow. Yes, in a way that the language of everyday life doesn't have words for. Your name, Taki says, or perhaps Mitsuha says, depending on which version you watch. What's your name? And the other smiles. And they're already crying. Because the question is not just a question. It's the question. It's been the question from the very beginning. The name that was almost written. The name that was forgotten. The name that the universe has been trying to say out loud for 5 years across time and disaster and memory and loss. The screen cuts to credits over a long, golden Tokyo dusk. And the last note of Radwimp's Nondimanaya fades out. And the theater, every theater, everywhere, is absolutely wrecked. Section 4, Character and Performance Analysis, 4500 to 5700. The people at the heart of it. Mitsuha Miyamizu. Mitsuha is the emotional spine of this film, and she is one of the most fully realized characters in modern animation. She's not a fantasy heroine. She's not exceptional. She's a 17-year-old girl who is frustrated and overlooked and longing for something she can't entirely name. Her arc is about desire, the desire to escape, yes, but more profoundly the desire to be seen. To matter. To be more than the role that tradition and family and small-town expectation have assigned to her. What's remarkable about her character is how her wish, I want to be a handsome Tokyo boy, comes true in the cruelest possible way. She gets to experience Tokyo life, but as someone else's body. She gets to matter in Taki's world, but anonymously. Her agency throughout the film is constantly constrained by forces outside her control, the town, the comet, time itself, and yet she fights anyway. The final act, where she races through Itomori trying to save her people even as her memory is dissolving, is one of the most viscerally heroic moments in any animated film. Not because she has powers. Because she's running as fast as a 17-year-old can run, and that has to be enough. Mone Kamishiraishi's voice performance in the Japanese version is extraordinary, warm and raw and funny and devastated in all the right proportions. She finds the real girl inside the supernatural circumstance. Tachibana. Taki is the more exterior character, defined by action and reaction rather than interiority. He sketches. He acts. He moves. But what makes him interesting is his capacity for devotion. Once he realizes what Mitsuha means to him, or rather, what she has already meant to him without his knowledge, he becomes completely single-minded. He climbs a mountain alone to drink a dead girl's sake on the off chance it will do something. That is either the most romantic thing or the most unhinged thing a person can do, and in this movie it is both. Ryunosuke Kamiki brings a slightly prickly, awkward energy to the role that works perfectly. Taki isn't a romantic lead by construction. He's a normal kid who gets caught in something larger than himself and rises to it completely. The supporting world. The supporting characters are sketched with remarkable efficiency. Tessie, Mitsuha's best male friend, is the kind of loyal, slightly reckless sidekick who in a lesser film would be comic relief and nothing more. Here, his decision to actually blow up the power grid based on Taki's instructions, which he barely understands, delivered with a matter-of-fact teenage bravado, is one of the film's most charming moments. Sayaka, Mitsuha's best girlfriend, provides warmth and humor and a grounded counterpoint to the supernatural weirdness swirling around her best friend. Grandmother Hitoha is the keeper of the film's mystical framework. Her explanation of musubi, the ancient concept of connection, is delivered with a quiet authority that plants the metaphysical seeds the film needs planted without ever feeling like an info dump. And Okudera-san, Taki's co-worker crush, deserves a moment. She's older, beautiful, and fully aware that Taki is falling for someone else even before he is. Her graceful stepping aside is done with zero bitterness and maximum dignity, and it says something important about the film's respect for all of its characters, even the ones who don't get the ending they wanted. Section 5, Themes, Symbolism and Subtext, 5700-107. What is this movie really about? Musubi, the thread that connects. The Japanese concept of musubi is the thematic heart of your name. The word is translated in the film as connection or binding, but Grandmother Hitoha's explanation goes deeper. Musubi is the power of the gods, the power of things twisting and tying together. The thread of fate. The running of water. The flow of time. All of these are musubi. All of these are the same thing. Shinkai builds his entire film on this concept. The braided cord that Mitsuha wears in her hair, and which she gives to Taki when they nearly meet in the twilight, is literally musubi, a woven object. The comet is musubi. The sacred ritual is musubi. Even the act of the body swap is musubi, two lives braided together across time. The film is asking you to think of connection not as a metaphor but as a physical force, as real as gravity, as fundamental as time, memory and identity. The film is obsessed with the unreliability of memory, not in the conspiracy thriller sense of what if everything is a lie, but in the more personal, devastating sense of, what happens to love when memory fails? What happens to identity when the memories that define you dissolve? Every time Taki or Mitsuha returns to their own body, they lose fidelity on what just happened. They remember a dream. They remember a feeling. But the details slip. And the film uses this as a metaphor for how we hold the most important people in our lives, always incompletely, always with something lost in translation, always with the terrifying knowledge that memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction, and reconstructions can fail. The fact that Taki cannot remember Mitsuha's name, that the most fundamental identifier of a person slips from him, is not just plot mechanics. It is the film saying, even the people we love most can become undone in us. Not because we stop loving them, but because memory is mortal. The antidote the film proposes, write it down, hold on, look for each other on staircases 5 years later, is both practical and magical, which is precisely what the film is. Urban versus rural Japan. There is a pointed social observation running through the film's body swap conceit. Mitsuha's longing for Tokyo is a very real phenomenon in contemporary Japan, the gravitational pull of the capital on young people from rural areas, the sense that your real life can only begin once you've escaped your hometown. Taki's Tokyo, by contrast, is crowded and loud and full of strangers and ultimately a little hollow. The film doesn't moralize about which is better. It simply shows both, and it shows both with love. The green mist of Itomori's mountains and the orange-lit density of Shinjuku at rush hour are both rendered with equal care, equal beauty. The message isn't Tokyo bad, small town good or vice versa. It's something more complex. Wherever you are looking for something that is not a place. Comet as symbol. The comet, Tiamat's comet, as it's named, is doing a lot of symbolic work throughout the film. It is beautiful and it is catastrophic. It splits in two, with one fragment striking the earth while the other continues on its path. This mirrors the relationship between Taki and Mitsuha, two fragments of the same celestial event, traveling through time and space, one impact-bound, one drifting on. The comet is also a stand-in for fate in the Japanese tradition, a heavenly sign that can be read as either blessing or curse depending on interpretation. The townspeople of Itomori celebrate it as a once-in-a-lifetime light show. It is both. The film refuses to let it be only one thing. The name as metaphor. The title itself is the film's ultimate theme. Your name, Kimi no Na wa, is both a question and a declaration. It's the first thing you want to know about someone you're falling in love with. It's the last thing you can afford to forget. In Shinto tradition, a name is not just a label, it's an essence, a piece of the soul. To know someone's name is to hold a piece of them. To forget it is a kind of death. The film literalizes this beautifully. The moment Taki writes "I love you" instead of his name on Mitsuha's hand, whether by choice or because the Katawaridoki is pulling them apart too fast, is simultaneously the most romantic and most heartbreaking moment in the film. He chose to say the most important thing instead of the most useful thing. He told her how he felt instead of how to find him. It's an act of pure human instinct, and it's perfect, and it also means they spend 5 more years lost. Section 6, Technical and Artistic Review, 107 to 118. Craft at the highest level. Animation and cinematography. Let me be direct, Your Name is one of the most visually beautiful films ever made. I'm not qualifying that with for an animated film. I'm saying it flat out. As a piece of visual art, it competes with the finest cinematography in live-action filmmaking, and in several places it surpasses it. The Comics Wave Films animation team, led by art director Takumi Takai and cinematographer Makoto Shinkai himself, produces backgrounds that are photographically detailed to an almost insane degree. The sky in this film is a character. The way light moves through clouds, the quality of a mountain morning versus a Tokyo midday versus a twilight in a crater, each is distinct, each is gorgeous, and each carries emotional information. Shinkai learned his craft as a one-man animation studio before building a team, and that total artist sensibility means every visual choice has intentional weight. The film's color language is also sophisticated. Warm amber and orange tones dominate Itomori. It's a world of firelight and lanterns and autumn. Tokyo is blue and white and gray and neon pink. As the film progresses and the two worlds begin to bleed into each other, so do the palettes. The Katawaridoki sequence, where the twilight world fragments and the sky fills with those enormous, otherworldly bands of color, is in a category of its own. I have watched it probably 30 times. I notice something new every time. The scale is operatic, and yet the emotional focus remains on two teenagers running toward each other across a mountaintop. That balance, between the cosmic and the intimate, is the film's greatest technical achievement. Editing and structure. The film is edited by Go Ino, and the editing choices are as precise as the animation. The parallel cutting between Taki and Mitsuha's lives, which dominates the film's first act, creates a visual rhythm that feels musical. The film is cut to its own soundtrack in a way that blurs the line between editing and choreography. The structural choice to reveal the time gap twist mid-film rather than at the climax is counterintuitive and brilliant. Most films would save that for the third act. Shinkai uses it to destroy the floor beneath the audience, then gives them the entire back half of the film to watch the characters rebuild on top of the rubble. It makes the emotional arc feel like a true journey rather than a single twist. Music by Radwimps. I can't overstate how central the Radwimps score is to this film's success. The band, led by singer-songwriter Yojiro Noda, created both a full instrumental score and a series of J-rock songs that play over key sequences in the film in a way that is unusual for theatrical animation, more like a concert film or a music video than a traditional score. The most important pieces are Zen Zen Zensei, the driving, almost frantic rock song that opens the swap sequence montage and instantly establishes the film's emotional energy, and Nondemonaya, the closing theme, which is one of the most perfectly calibrated pieces of closing music I have encountered in any film. It does not triumphantly resolve. It lingers. It shimmers. It is the musical equivalent of a fond ache. The score also includes Mitsuha's theme and Taki's theme, two instrumental motifs that the film weaves together and pulls apart depending on whether its characters are connected or separate. When both motifs play simultaneously, it hits like a physical sensation. The choice to use a rock band rather than a traditional orchestral composer was a risk. It pays off completely. Radwimp's music has a rawness and an urgency that a traditional film score might have smoothed out, and this film needs that rawness. It's a film about teenagers, for teenagers, and also about the parts of us that remain 17 forever, and the music speaks directly to all of those. Section 7, Critical Review and Comparisons, 118 to 128. What works, what doesn't, and where it stands. Strengths. The body swap premise is handled with more emotional intelligence than almost any Western equivalent. Hollywood has made body swap comedies, Freaky Friday, The Change Up, 13 Going on 30, and they tend to use the premise as a vehicle for hijinks and life lessons. Your Name uses it as a vehicle for intimacy. By the time the two characters meet, they already know each other more completely than most people ever know anyone, because they've lived inside each other's mundane daily realities. That is a genuinely original idea for this genre. The time gap reveal is executed flawlessly. There's a difference between a twist that recontextualizes previous scenes and a twist that feels like a cheat. This is the former. Every clue was visible. The film played completely fair. And still almost nobody sees it coming, because Shinkai has been so careful about what he emphasizes and what he lets blur. The final act balances spectacle and emotion in a way that blockbusters worth 3 times the budget typically fail to achieve. The comet strike sequence is visually jaw-dropping, but it never loses sight of the two teenagers at its center. The film's heart never stops beating even during its most cinematically overwhelming moments. Weaknesses. If the film has a weakness, it's in some of the logic of its own rules. The mechanics of the body swap, why it happens across time, what determines when it occurs, how drinking the Gucci kamikaze triggers Taki's return, are never fully explained, and the film invites you to accept this on faith. For some viewers, the internal logic feels shaky. For others, the ambiguity is part of the magic. I fall firmly in the second camp, but I acknowledge the first. The film also rushes slightly through its final act. The evacuation sequence, which should carry enormous emotional weight, is somewhat compressed. There are quick cuts and montage where individual moments might have hit harder with more time. This is the kind of problem you'd never notice on a first watch, because you're caught up in the momentum. But on rewatch, you can feel the pacing skip a beat in those final 15 minutes. The ending, too, is deliberately ambiguous about exactly what has been restored and how much has been lost. This is intentional. Shinkai has talked about wanting to preserve the emotional uncertainty, but some viewers find it unsatisfying. I find it honest. Love at the end of a film that has put two people through what this film puts them through shouldn't arrive without cost. Comparisons to Hollywood and beyond. The closest Western comparison is probably Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, not in mechanics, but in emotional architecture. Both films are about the persistence of love against the erosion of memory. Both films structure their narratives around revelation and reconstruction. Both are willing to let their endings be tinged with pain even as they reach toward joy. In terms of animated cinema, Your Name occupies a specific space that Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke previously occupied, a work of such quality and emotional ambition that it transcends the genre label entirely. You don't watch it and think this is a great anime. You watch it and think this is a great film, full stop. The comparison to Steven Spielberg's work is also worth making, specifically Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T., not in subject matter, but in the willingness to treat inexplicable, cosmic-scale events with genuine human weight. Spielberg's great gift was always making the universal feel personal. Shinkai's too. Where Your Name differs from most of its Hollywood comparisons is in its willingness to sit with grief. American mainstream cinema tends to heal its characters quickly, or at least definitively. The 5-year epilogue of Your Name, in which both characters carry the weight of something they can't name or explain, is unusually comfortable with unresolved pain. That discomfort is part of what makes the eventual reunion feel earned rather than given. Section 8, Final Verdict and Ending, 128 to 135. The final word. Your Name is a film about the terrifying intimacy of loving someone you've never properly met. It's about small-town dreams and big-city loneliness and the ancient idea that some connections are so profound they survive death, distance, and the deletion of memory. It's about the moment you look across a crowd or a train car or a staircase and feel, with absolute, inexplicable certainty, that this stranger is not a stranger at all. It is also, technically, one of the most accomplished animated films ever produced. Makoto Shinkai, who once made animations alone in his apartment, overseeing every frame, has built a team and a visual language that stands alongside any studio in the world. Comics Wave Films has created something here that deserves to sit on the same shelf as Citizen Kane and 2001 and Mulholland Drive and every other film we point to when we're trying to explain what the medium is capable of. But here's the thing about Your Name. That keeps me coming back to it, years after its release. It is not a cold masterpiece. It is not the kind of film you admire from a distance. It reaches into you. It finds the part of you that has looked for something without knowing what it is, the part that has loved someone imperfectly, the part that is afraid of forgetting what matters. And it says, I know that feeling. And it is not nothing. It is everything. The question at the film's end, what's your name? Is the simplest question in the world. It's the question you ask a stranger. But by the time Taki and Mitsuha ask it of each other on that staircase, in the fading Tokyo light, with 5 years and a comet and a lake full of ghosts between them, it is also the only question that has ever mattered. It is the question of recognition. The question of love. The question of whether the universe, all its chaos, all its indifferent machinery, can be interrupted by two people who were simply meant to find each other. Shinkai's answer is, yes. With reservations. With scars. With the full acknowledgement of everything it costs. But yes. And on the days when the world feels very large and very cold and the gap between who you are and who you might have been feels very wide, that yes is worth an enormous amount. My rating, 9.8 out of 10. A masterpiece of modern cinema, animated or otherwise. Outro, sign off before you go. If you've made it this far, genuinely, thank you. This film deserves to be talked about at length, and I hope this breakdown gave you something new to think about, whether you're watching it for the first time or the 5th. If you haven't seen Your Name. Yet, I want you to go watch it right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. Clear 90 minutes, turn the lights down, put your phone in another room, and let it do what it does. You will not be the same person on the other side of it. I promise you that. And if you're someone who saw it and cried and didn't entirely understand why, I hope this helped. Because that feeling is real. It's telling you something true about yourself. About what you're looking for. About who you might not have forgotten yet. Take care of yourselves out there. And go find whatever it is your gut is telling you to find. I'll see you in the next one.